Hi, my name is Pearl, and I am the main character of the story. Make sure you watch this video to the end.
Hi, my name is Alexander, and I am the main character of the story. Make sure you watch this video to the end.
The sun blazed overhead, the heat like fire licking the skin of everyone walking through the market. In the middle of the sweaty, bustling crowd, a woman was tirelessly selling popsicles. She carried a styrofoam box in her left hand and held the hands of her 2 children with the right. "Cold popsicles, just $1, refreshing and sweet," shouted Pearl, her voice nearly gone from hours of calling out. Her twins, a boy and a girl, stayed cheerfully beside her, seemingly unaffected by the heat. The girl fanned herself with a piece of cardboard, while the boy busily counted the change from their last sale. Across the street, a sleek black SUV came to a halt. From it stepped a tall, clean-cut man, his crisp shirt and polished shoes clearly out of place in the dust and grime of the public market. He paused on the sidewalk, holding his breath. When Pearl looked over and their eyes met, she froze. It was him, the man she had once loved, the man she had sworn never to see again. Before she could look away, a question rose from the innocent mouth of one of her children. "Mommy, who is he? And why is he crying?" 7 a.m. in the suburbs of Los Angeles. The sun was already blazing hot, the kind of heat that clings to the skin like exhaust fumes in a traffic jam. In a commercial district nestled beside a highway, the sliding doors of a supermarket opened quietly as employees filed in one by one, each wearing a name tag and forcing smiles despite the obvious lack of sleep. Among the cashiers packed tightly into the locker room was a woman with a quiet, simple beauty. Modest and kind, her smile reached her eyes every time. Her name was Pearl. She was slender, with a soft face, always with a smile on her lips even though the exhaustion showed. She wore a faded but clean supermarket uniform. In front of a small mirror tucked inside her locker, she carefully brushed her hair, making sure she didn't look worn down, even though she knew that within hours, the heat from her checkout lane would melt away any effort she put in. Her shift started at 9 a.m. and would run until 7 p.m. at Register 4. "Pearl, you're on Register 4 again, okay?" called her supervisor from across the room. She simply smiled. "Sure thing, ma'am." It was still early, but the rush of mums with shopping carts had already begun. Every beep of the scanner came with a "Good morning, ma'am," or "Thank you, sir," in her soft, kind voice. Even when her fingers grew numb from pressing buttons and handing out change, she never lost her spirit. "Good morning, ma'am. Good morning, sir," she greeted each customer. Some never even looked her in the eye, but she didn't mind. A few smiled back. Sometimes, a sweet elderly woman would hand her a piece of candy. "Oh, sweetheart, here, a little sugar to keep your energy up," the old woman would say. "Thank you, ma'am," Pearl would reply, smiling as she gently placed the change in the drawer. A few generous customers even tipped her with crisp bills. "This is for that smile of yours," a kind middle-aged man once said with a wink, more like a father than a flirt. There were regulars who knew her by name. Mr. Tony, who always bought 5 bottles of soda every Tuesday, often brought her bread. "Here, dear, I know you leave early for work. You probably haven't had breakfast." He'd hand her a sandwich roll stuffed with butter and cheese. "Oh, thank you so much, Mr. Tony. I'm embarrassed." "Don't be. You work hard. I hope you get hired full-time." "I'm praying for that too, sir. Thank you." But not all customers were like Mr. Tony. Not every day came with tips. Not every customer was kind. One afternoon, a well-dressed woman stormed over, furious because she thought her change was 60 cents short, even though the receipt showed it was exact. "Why does it feel like I'm the one being scammed here? Can't you count?" "I'm very sorry, ma'am. Let's double-check your receipt," Pearl said calmly, even though frustration was building in her eyes. Pearl went over the receipt again, counted the change slowly, and proved it was correct. Still, the woman wasn't satisfied. She turned on her heel and stormed off, muttering insults. "Rude! Can't even count!" she scoffed. Pearl didn't respond. She was used to scenes like that. She swallowed the sigh building in her chest and turned back to the next customer with a smile. Despite everything, she kept smiling. She was used to hard days. Hours passed, the sky grew dark. During slow moments, Pearl would grab the small bottle of alcohol, tucked beside the register, and wipe down the keypad, trying to keep her workspace clean. By 7 p.m., she stepped out of the supermarket, tired but composed. Her ride home was a packed city bus. She was often standing, sandwiched between other sweaty commuters. To most people, she was just another ordinary woman. But behind the eyes that always stared out the window, there were dreams. Dreams she reached for, even when her arms could barely stretch that far. Back home, in a small rental unit on the edge of a Los Angeles alleyway, Pearl slipped off her worn shoes and set down a plastic bag of bread and milk. Inside, her grandmother, Grandma Teresa, lay on a thin mat, a faded blanket draped over her frail, sickly body. "Grandma, are you awake? How are you feeling?" Pearl greeted gently. "Still breathing," Grandma joked, letting out a small cough. Pearl chuckled. "Time for your bath." She carefully lifted her, wiped her with warm water, dressed her in a fresh house dress, and served her a hot bowl of soup she'd brought home from the market. Propping her up on a small pillow, she spoon-fed her a bit of porridge. "My dear," the elderly woman's voice was weak, "let me die already." Pearl smiled as she fluffed up her pillow. "Grandma, stop with the dark humor. You promised we'd visit the Grand Canyon together, remember?" Her grandmother looked at her, briefly stunned. A tear trickled from the corner of her eye. "It's been so long since I last saw that place, sweetheart. Maybe it'll just stay a dream." But Pearl didn't falter. She stood and pulled out a plastic coin bank from under the dresser. It was full, pennies, nickels, dimes, quarters. Beside it was a small envelope labeled "Bus Fare to the Grand Canyon." "See this?" Pearl said with a grin. "This is for our trip." She had a separate piggy bank for the hotel and food. "You're too much," Grandma said with a soft chuckle. "No, Grandma. My paycheck covers rent, food, electricity, and your meds. This is our dream fund. I want to make you happy. We won't be here forever. I promise. We're going." Pearl and her grandmother were all each other had. Her mother died giving birth to her, and she never met her father. He'd started a new family almost immediately. So Grandma Teresa became both mother and father to her since childhood. Pearl only graduated high school. She had dreamed of continuing her studies, maybe to become a teacher or take a writing course. She loved writing in old notebooks at night. She also loved reading second-hand romance novels bought from street vendors. She once dreamed of becoming a famous author, but when Grandma Teresa got sick, Pearl had no choice but to work. She took any job she could find: fast food crew member, janitor, market vendor, until she ended up here, working as a cashier at a supermarket on a short-term contract. She was nervous. She had only 1 month left in her contract. She wasn't sure if she'd be made permanent. There were rumors of ghost employees, people removed even if they were excellent at their jobs. Their supervisor was also known for playing favorites, especially toward those who had connections to upper management. That night, after washing the dishes and organizing Grandma's medications, Pearl sat at the edge of the table. She opened her wallet and counted the cash for their electricity and water bills. The deadline was near. It was just enough. There was nothing extra for sandals or a new pair of shoes. In fact, the shoes she wore were already torn. Every time it rained, her socks got soaked. But what about the rent? Tears welled up, not the kind of tears that came with sobbing, but silent ones, tears of fatigue and fear. Just one more month until her contract ended at the supermarket. There was still no assurance she'd be regularized. Favoritism was rampant, and many supervisors had their pets. Some employees, despite being underperformers, were immediately hired full-time. Meanwhile, Pearl had no connections, no strings to pull. Her chances felt thin. "It's going to be okay," she whispered to herself. "I can do this. I have to." The next morning, Pearl woke up early. She asked a neighbor to watch over her grandmother. As she dressed for work, she noticed the front of her shoe had peeled open. "Really? You're giving up on me now?" she muttered, pressing the flap together with a dab of industrial glue. From the bed, Grandma called out, "Sweetheart, just use the money from the coin bank. Buy a new pair." "No, Grandma, that's for our Grand Canyon trip, remember?" She smiled and kissed her grandmother on the cheek before stepping out. At the supermarket, Pearl was all smiles again in her cashier lane. Like nothing was wrong. Like she hadn't cried the night before. Like she wasn't holding her shoe together with glue. While she was busy scanning items, one of her fellow cashiers leaned in to whisper, "Pearl, check out the handsome guy. Look over there." Her co-worker, Rena, grinned. "They say he's an investor." Pearl just laughed. "Please, like he'd even notice us." She bent back to her work, focused. She didn't pay attention, but at the far end of the grocery store stood a man wearing a designer button-down shirt and an expensive watch. He watched quietly, eyes intense. Alexander Villafuerte, CEO of VF Consolidated, head of the company acquiring the supermarket chain, one of the country's most powerful businessmen. And yet, the moment he saw the simple cashier standing at register 4, it was as if time stopped. He didn't know her name, he didn't know her story, but with just one glance, he felt warmth bloom in his chest. Her smile, meant only for customers, hit him like the first rays of sun after a storm, and from a distance, he fell in love for the first time with a woman whose name he didn't even know. The checkout lane was quiet again. A week had passed since the investors visited the supermarket. For Pearl, nothing had changed. Life moved as it always did. Wake up early, ask Mrs. Wilson to look after her grandmother, glue the front of her shoes, then spend the whole day at work. It was as if her days followed a pattern, nothing ever strayed from routine. But across the city, inside a glass tower overlooking the freeway, a man couldn't sit still. Alexander. At 32, he was already a billionaire, CEO of VF Consolidated, which was now acquiring the very supermarket chain where Pearl worked. Sharp, calculated, cold to many. Yet ever since that day, his first glimpse of the woman at register 4, he'd felt something spark in his heart. He didn't know why, he didn't even know her name, but he couldn't forget her smile as she said, "Thank you, take care," to a customer. That simple phrase had weight. He kept hearing it in his head. One afternoon, while reviewing audit reports, he turned to his assistant. "Werner," he said quietly, "can you look into someone at the supermarket branch? Register 4. I think her name is Pearl." Werner raised an eyebrow. She was used to unusual requests from the boss, but this one had a different tone, personal. Just a few days later, Werner returned. "Her name is Pearl Mendoza, 23, high school graduate, contractual, low chance of being regularized. The branch has a reputation for ghost employees and internal favoritism." Alexander didn't respond immediately. He just nodded. He couldn't explain it, but something about this woman stayed with him. Not out of pity, it was something else. He felt she had a story that didn't deserve to end behind a cashier lane. Back at the supermarket, Pearl had no idea that someone, from afar, was quietly watching her life unfold. She continued working, counting change, smiling, assisting customers. And every night, even if exhausted, she went home with a cheerful smile for her grandmother. But one afternoon, during her break, her supervisor called out, "Pearl, check your locker. Your phone's been ringing non-stop. Might be an emergency." She stood up immediately. A strange nervousness settled in her chest. The first thing that crossed her mind was her grandmother. Opening her locker, she grabbed her old phone. Missed calls, 3, 4, 6, all from Mrs. Wilson. She answered right away. "Pearl, sweetheart, you have to come home. Your grandma, she collapsed earlier. She hasn't woken up." Pearl couldn't speak. She dropped the phone. She didn't even count how many times she asked for permission to leave. She ran, took the first available bus, walked through congested streets. When she arrived at home, the ambulance was already parked out front. The door was wide open. Neighbors stood outside, some crying, some with heads bowed. She approached slowly, but she already knew. Her grandmother was gone. She broke down, kneeling beside the stretcher. "You didn't even let me say goodbye. You didn't wait for me. We were supposed to see the Grand Canyon." The entire night was filled with quiet sobs, haunted laughter from old memories, and the suffocating silence of loss. Pearl, who had always been strong, always smiled in the face of hardship, finally gave in. The only pillar in her world was gone. The one who raised her, the one who taught her how to love despite poverty. The next day, one of the branch supervisors filed a report, which reached Werner, who immediately sent a message to Alexander. "Sir, I think you should know. Pearl, the cashier, lost her grandmother last night." Alexander didn't know how to react. He didn't know Pearl personally, but there was something about her, a pull, a lightness, enough for him to feel sorrow and offer sympathy. And so, that evening, the entire wake was taken by surprise when a luxury car pulled up outside. Out stepped a man in black slacks and a long-sleeved shirt. Tall, composed, someone you'd never expect to show up at a wake held in a modest home near a back alley. Pearl was standing beside the casket, tears still clinging to her eyes. When she looked up and saw the man approaching, something about him felt familiar. "Good evening," he said gently. "I'm Alexander Villafuerte. I came to offer my condolences." Pearl froze. "You're the—" She couldn't finish her sentence. Alexander simply nodded. "Register number 4, right?" Despite her swollen eyes, Pearl managed a small smile. "I'm sorry. Things are a bit chaotic here." "It's all right," he replied. "I know this isn't the right time, but I want you to know, I'm willing to help." Pearl didn't answer. She didn't know what to say, but she felt the sincerity in his voice. And among the many people who visited that night, this stranger seemed to give her the one thing she needed most, a little strength. A week passed after the funeral. The days drifted by like wind. Pearl stayed quiet. She barely stepped out of the room where her grandmother once slept. No more cooking, no more bathing her, no more morning jokes, no more laughter at the table, no reason to rush home. One day, her phone rang, a call from supermarket HR. "Pearl Mendoza, please report to the main office today. We have an offer for you." Pearl was stunned, nervous. She quickly changed and rushed over, not having any idea what was waiting for her. When she arrived, the branch manager greeted her. "Pearl, effective immediately, we are promoting you to administrative head of our branch. We've received excellent feedback about your work ethic, and we believe you're capable of more responsibility." Her eyes widened. "Me? Are you sure?" The manager nodded. "Yes, you start next week, full-time, with benefits." She couldn't believe it. A deep breath, a burst of laughter, a stream of tears. All the emotions came rushing in. It was as if a thorn had finally been pulled from her chest. As soon as she stepped out of the office, she couldn't help herself. She texted the number Alexander had left during the wake. "Pearl, sir, thank you. I don't know what you did, but thank you. This means so much to me." Minutes later, a reply came. "Alexander, you earned it, Pearl. I just gave them a nudge. You deserve the world." From then on, their communication began. Not romantic, not yet, but something close. Like they had their own world. They texted every evening. Sometimes Alexander would ask, "Alexander, how was your day?" Pearl, "Busy, sir, but happy. Admin work is lighter than cashiering, even with more paperwork." Alexander, "I believe in you." Sometimes Pearl would joke, "Pearl, sir, I saw your picture in a magazine. You look better in person. Just don't be so serious all the time." Alexander, "Noted. I'll try to smile more." And through these simple exchanges, something slowly blossomed. Quiet, secret, but real. In her first week as head admin of the grocery branch, Pearl's daily routine noticeably changed. Her tasks were no longer just about managing receipts or organizing inventory. She was now part of a larger system, directly reporting to the head office of VF Consolidated. And that meant she would be seeing more often the man she never expected to become a part of her world, Alexander. Her first visit to the office was nerve-wracking. She wore a white blouse and an old black skirt she'd ironed the night before. She carried a folder of reports, hands slightly trembling from the cold air conditioning, and nerves. When the elevator doors opened on the 11th floor, Alexander was already there, standing beside a large window, leaning casually, wearing a simple grey shirt and slacks, and still, he looked like the most important person in the building. "Pearl," he greeted, flashing a smile. "Right on time." Pearl bit her lip and smiled back. "Sorry if I seem nervous. It's my first time in such a beautiful office." "You have nothing to worry about," Alexander replied, reaching for the reports she brought. "I just want to know how you're doing, how the branch is holding up. But more than that, I want to get to know you." From that point on, Pearl began visiting the office weekly, and as the reports piled up, so did the opportunities for them to grow closer. At first, their conversations were purely work-related, budget summaries, employee feedback, sales comparisons, but soon they became more personal. "What's your favorite dish?" Alexander asked once while they were eating together in the office pantry. "Jackfruit curry," Pearl answered without hesitation, "with chili and smoked fish." Alexander laughed. "Wow, I've never tried that, but it sounds amazing. Me, even if the media calls me a billionaire, I still crave good old chicken adobo." The space between them always seemed to soften when they looked at each other. Sometimes they didn't even need words. A smile, a glance, a shared sip of coffee in the pantry, and it was as if something quiet was being built between their hearts. One evening, Pearl got caught in a downpour outside the building. She didn't have an umbrella and hesitated to squeeze in under the guard's awning. Just as she was about to make a dash for it, a black SUV honked nearby. The window rolled down. "Pearl," Alexander called, "get in." "It's okay, sir. I might soak your seats," she replied, embarrassed. "The seat's not important. You are." Pearl froze. Her heart skipped at his words. She climbed into the vehicle. The hem of her skirt was drenched, her shoulders shivering slightly. They were quiet at first. Alexander had his hand on the steering wheel. Pearl tried to hide her smile. Then he spoke. "You know, Pearl, sometimes I envy you." "Sir?" "I'm rich, but you're easier to talk to. You smile so easily. Meanwhile, no matter how good the news, I find it hard to smile. But when I'm with you, it's easier." Pearl didn't respond. Her heart had its own rhythm now. This wasn't the same CEO she first saw across a checkout lane. There was depth to Alexander, and in every word, in every glance, there was warmth slowly pulling her in. Weeks passed. Sometimes Alexander would still visit the grocery branch for sudden inspections. Other times they'd bump into each other in the pantry, and sometimes it seemed like they were deliberately finding ways to meet. Each encounter began with a bit of awkwardness, but always ended with a lingering look, shared laughter, and inside jokes only the two of them understood. One afternoon, while they sipped coffee in the conference room, Alexander asked, "Pearl, do you believe in fate?" "Maybe," Pearl answered. "Sometimes things or people come into your life, even when you never planned them, and they change everything." Alexander smiled quietly and looked at her. "Would you like to change mine?" Pearl's eyes widened. She immediately hid behind her coffee cup, cheeks turning red. That evening, both of them were restless. Neither had said it outright, but both kept glancing at their phones, hoping for a message. Eventually, they found each other in a chat. Alexander: "Pearl, there's something I want to say." Pearl: "What is it, sir?" Alexander: "I can't treat you like just an employee anymore. I can't avoid you. I like you, Pearl." Pearl stared up at the ceiling of her small room. The walls were thin, the neighbors loud, the air thick with the smell of boiled bananas. And yet, she felt like she was floating. Pearl: "Alexander, me too." The next day, Alexander showed up at her house. He brought her pork sinigang, supposedly cooked by his chef. He said he couldn't sleep without knowing she was okay. They talked under the porch light, at her grandmother's wooden table. What started as a simple catch-up turned into a deeper conversation. "Pearl," Alexander began, "I know there will be obstacles. I'm a billionaire. You're a woman fighting to get by. We're from different worlds. But here," he placed a hand on his chest, "you're the one my heart beats for." Pearl's tears fell, not from sadness. "I don't know if this is right, Alexander," she replied, "but I want to try." And for the first time, her hand reached for his. No kisses, no promises, only hope. Early the next morning, Pearl stood in front of a small mirror, nailed to the wall, carefully brushing her hair. She didn't need to ask herself why she had chosen to wear her newly bought blouse from the downtown bargain store. She already knew the answer. She was going to see Alexander today. Though it wasn't officially her reporting day at the head office, she'd been invited for a special meeting about a new inventory system. But deep down, she knew it was more than that. Maybe I overdid the perfume," she whispered to herself. "They might notice." But no matter how she tried to tone herself down, she couldn't hide the sparkle in her eyes. Every step she took felt like it had music in it. What used to be heavy days were lighter now, especially knowing she'd see Alexander. Meanwhile, at the office, Alexander was busy facing the board of directors, but his mind kept drifting. From the glass wall of the conference room, he stole glances at the clock, waiting for their meeting. After finishing the presentation on their expansion to San Diego, he immediately stepped out and headed to the lounge, where Pearl was already waiting, and the moment he saw her, everything seemed to pause. Pearl wore a soft blue blouse. Her hair was neatly tied back. She clutched her folders tightly, trying to keep her hands from shaking. "Hi," Alexander greeted quietly, almost in a whisper. "Thanks for coming." "Good morning, sir," Pearl replied with a smile, as if they hadn't already confessed their feelings. Alexander grinned. "We're past formalities. How many times do I have to tell you? Just call me Alexander." "Sorry, Alexander," Pearl answered, giggling. The meeting began in a serious tone. They reviewed inventory discrepancies from a certain branch, but as time passed, they couldn't help the occasional joke or glance meant only for each other. "You know," Alexander said as he demonstrated the new digital monitoring system, This makes it easier to spot which employees are not just good at their job, but also absolutely captivating. Pearl looked at him, trying hard not to blush. "Careful, sir. This might be recorded on Zoom." "There's no Zoom," he replied with a wink. "This is just between us." Like a secret world, a world within a larger one, full of gossip, judgment, and noise. As their connection deepened, their bond grew stronger. They started sneaking coffee breaks, sometimes in the office pantry, sometimes just outside the building. There was a small food stand where no one knew the CEO was dating a former cashier. One night, as they sat eating beef stew from a paper plate on the sidewalk, it suddenly began to rain. "No umbrella," Pearl laughed. "Are you wet?" Alexander said as he quickly pulled his arm around her shoulders. "It's okay," she said, "as long as I'm with you." Under the tarp of the street vendor's stall, with wet shoulders and hot broth warming their hands, they felt like nothing else in the world mattered. It was the start of something unspoken, real, quiet, but undeniably true. But behind the smiles, a storm was slowly building. At the grocery branch, some staff started noticing Pearl spending more time on the phone. Occasionally, she would smile in a way they couldn't quite explain. "Hey, look at the admin head, texting someone again," one cashier whispered while sipping her coffee in the pantry. "Think it's the CEO." "Feeling special, huh?" Another chimed in. Riza, who had long been envious of Pearl, added, "Look at her. She used to be on register duty, now suddenly promoted. Please, it's obvious she's got a backer." "Maybe she's just good at her job," said Maris, a stalker and one of Pearl's closest friends. "Don't be naive," Risa snapped. "In today's world, hard work isn't enough. You need to know how to get in good with the higher-ups." While the whispers and rumors grew behind her back, Pearl had no idea a storm was coming. One day at the office, she noticed a shift in how some supervisors treated her. The respectful Miss Pearl was gone, replaced with a cold, clipped "noted." It was like a wall had gone up around her. "Pearl," Maris said one evening, pulling her aside. "I heard something. People are saying you're in a relationship with Mr. Alexander." Pearl's face turned pale. She sat down, stunned. "Who said that?" "I don't know where it started, but it's spreading fast." Pearl covered her mouth, not out of shame, but fear. What if she lost their trust? What if she lost her job again? That night, she called Alexander. "Alexander, there's gossip going around." "I know," he replied. "I admit, it's my fault. I couldn't stop myself. But Pearl, if being with you means facing trouble, I'm willing." "But Alex," Pearl said softly, "I'm the woman in this. I'll be the one judged. I'll be the one questioned. Why me? Why us? I might lose the respect of everyone I work with." "Pearl," Alexander said gently, "you matter to me, and no matter what happens, I won't let you get hurt." Days passed, and they became more careful. They stopped meeting at the office as often. In meetings, they kept things strictly professional. But no matter how hard they tried to hide their feelings, fate had other plans. One evening, Alexander showed up at Pearl's house, unannounced. In his eyes, he wasn't a CEO. He was just a man in love, ready to fight. "Pearl," he said quietly, as they stood outside her home, "I can't do this anymore. I don't want to keep hiding and hurting. If you want to end this, I'll let go. But if there's even a part of you that still feels the same, I'll fight." Tears streamed down Pearl's face. She remembered her grandmother, who once dreamed of going to the Grand Canyon. She thought of the coins they'd saved, the dreams they built in silence. And now, here was a man who loved her, not out of pity, but as a woman. "Alexander, I don't know the right answer," she said, "but I love you, and I don't want to hide anymore." And with those words, she pulled him into an embrace. No more secrets. It was the beginning of their fight for love. Pearl's days became brighter. Though their relationship remained discreet, she felt Alexander's love in every moment they shared. Secret texts during shifts, quiet coffees at lunch breaks, and late-night conversations in his car, parked near her home. But as her grandmother once said, not everything sweet is safe. One morning, while reviewing inventory logs in the office, Maris approached with a serious expression and a phone in hand. "Pearl, have you seen this?" On the screen was a viral Facebook post from a popular gossip group. The caption read, "From cashier to admin head, special treatment, or just a special someone at the top?" Chatter. From register to queen. There was a blurred photo of Pearl getting into a luxury car. Alexander's face wasn't visible, but the vehicle was clearly recognizable. Pearl sat down, her fingers trembling. "Who posted this?" she asked. "No one knows," Maris replied, "but everyone in the office is already talking about it." The next day, HR called. She was asked to report to the 5th floor. As she walked through the corridor, Pearl could feel the eyes watching her. Silent stares, whispered gossip, judgment in every glance. In the HR manager's office, the question came immediately. "Pearl, is it true? Is the post accurate? Are you in a relationship with Mr. Alexander Villafuerte?" Pearl hesitated. She wanted to lie, to protect her job. But Alexander's words echoed in her mind. "If we're going to fight for this, we need to be honest." She gave a quiet but firm answer. "Yes, we're in a relationship, but I've never used it to gain anything at work." The HR manager nodded slowly. "I understand, but we need to handle this carefully, especially if the board starts asking questions." In a closed-door board meeting, questions were fired at Alexander. He, once known for his discipline and unshakable reputation, now stood at the center of a potential conflict of interest. "Alex, we know you're smart," one senior board member said, "but dating an employee, even if she's hard-working, this looks questionable. What will people say? That the executive is taking advantage of a subordinate?" Alexander stood, his back straight, gaze sharp. "Watch your mouth. She's not just an employee. She's one of the most dedicated and sincere people in this company. And yes, we're in a relationship. But I never used my position to favor her. Her promotion was earned." "So you're saying this relationship is worth risking your position?" another asked. Alexander didn't blink. "Yes, it's private, but not a secret, and I'm not ashamed." "I love Pearl," he added, "and I don't owe anyone an explanation about that." Months passed after the intense controversy, and slowly, peace returned. Alexander's legal team advised that Pearl take a temporary leave while the compliance systems were adjusted. During that time, their relationship only grew stronger. No cameras, no posts, just the two of them. And in a small civil ceremony in Napa Valley, they were joined by a few trusted friends. No white gown, no grand reception, but as Alexander whispered his vows under the Californian sunset, nothing felt missing. "Mrs. Pearl Villafuerte," Alexander whispered after the ceremony. "Feels like a dream," Pearl replied, "but you're the best part of waking up." One evening, while they were having dinner at Alexander's condo, Pearl was busy serving his favorite pork sinigang. "Careful," Alexander said, taking the bowl from her. "You'll spill that on yourself." Pearl smiled. "That's nothing. I've burned myself plenty just to serve the ones I love." Alexander leaned in, about to kiss his wife, when the front door suddenly opened. "Alexander!" They both turned. Standing at the entrance was a woman in slacks and a stylish blazer. Her silver hair framed a face of timeless elegance and poise. She carried herself like a former beauty queen, now shaped by the weight of time. It was Luzviminda, Alexander's mother. "Mum," Alexander whispered, shocked. "Wow, so you shut the door on your own mother now? And you're married? I had to find out like this? Pearl stood frozen, unsure whether to greet or explain. Alexander couldn't speak. You got married, Alexander? Luzviminda's voice was calm but firm. And I was the last to know. He regained composure. Mum, I didn't know you were back. I thought you were settled in California. You thought, she interrupted, but didn't you think I had the right to know what's going on in your life? She took a deep breath and turned to Pearl. You're the woman my son married? Pearl nodded, hands trembling as she offered a glass of water. Yes, Mum, I'm Pearl. Pearl? Luzviminda repeated flatly. Fitting name, so simple. Alexander stepped in. Mum, please. But Pearl already felt it. From Luzviminda's eyes she could see it. Disapproval. Not because of anything she did, but because of who she was, her background, her job, her modest dreams. And in the middle of the chilly night air, with sinigang cooling on the table, the silence around them also began to grow cold. The days that followed Luzviminda's unexpected return were anything but easy. From that night on, a cold wind seemed to sweep through Alexander and Pearl's home. Alexander tried to keep things calm. Pearl, meanwhile, didn't know how to navigate the space between her love for her husband and the fear that she'd never be enough for the world he came from. I want to fix everything, Alexander said one afternoon while they drank coffee together on the condo's veranda. I want you and my mother to be close. Pearl offered a faint smile. That is, if she wants that too. I promise you, Pearl, Alexander said firmly. You're not just part of my life. You're my home, and no matter what happens, I'll fight for you. Pearl didn't answer. She wanted to believe him, and when she looked into Alexander's eyes, she found every reason to try. So when they were invited to attend a major charity gala hosted by the Villafuerte Foundation, she didn't decline. For us, she said, and to ease your mother's mind. The night of the event arrived. The ballroom was extravagant. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, and the guests wore sleek tuxedos and dresses that shimmered like gods and goddesses. Pearl wore a simple evening gown, a soft pastel pink, custom sewn using her savings. It wasn't as expensive as the gowns around her, but she wore it with dignity. At first, she was nervous. She clung to Alexander's hand as they approached board members, politicians, and socialites, a world of power and formality. But slowly, she began to feel the stares, the whispers, the polite smiles hiding something sharp. And then Luzviminda approached, elegant in emerald green, draped in jewelry that spoke of generations of wealth. She smiled with a coldness only Pearl could feel. Oh, Pearl, she said, you look fresh, very provincial, blooming, charming. Some guests nearby raised their eyebrows. Pearl tried to smile. Thank you, Ma'am. Do you know which fork to use, dear? Luzviminda gestured toward the formal place setting. Before Pearl could answer, Luzviminda chuckled. It's all right. I'm sure Alexander can teach you. Moments later, a board member approached. Is she the new Mrs. Villafuerte? He asked Luzviminda directly. Oh, yes, Luzviminda replied, her voice dripping with sweetness. She's special, came from a humble beginning. I guess my son wanted a fairy tale. Pearl felt the weight of the world collapse onto her. She didn't know where to look or how to move through the space between the polished table and her flushed cheeks. She stood quietly, then slowly turned and walked out. She didn't try to hold back the tears anymore. She couldn't keep smiling in a world that clearly didn't want her. Alexander followed her to the back hallway near the garden, but before he could reach her, Luzviminda called his name sharply. Mum, how could you do that? Alexander asked, his voice rising. I was protecting you, Luzviminda answered. By humiliating my wife in front of everyone. She doesn't belong in our world. Alex, you were groomed to lead. to represent this family, not to marry. Don't you dare finish that sentence, Alexander snapped. Then came the slap, loud, harsh, like it sealed something broken. How dare you talk back to your mother, Luzviminda shouted. Behind the curtain, Pearl stood trembling and in tears. She couldn't believe what she was hearing, or seeing. Alexander was frozen in shock, but then rushed toward Pearl, taking her hand and pulling her away from the place that had just torn them both apart. The ride home was silent. Neither of them spoke until they stepped inside their unit. Then Pearl finally said what had been weighing on her heart. I can't stand seeing you hurt because of me, Pearl said, her voice cracking. Alexander, I'm not mad at you, but I don't want to be the reason you lose your family. She's your mother, Pearl continued, tears building. Alexander, she's your mother. Alexander moved closer, holding her hand gently. You didn't take me from her. I chose you. I keep choosing you every day. Whatever happens. But what if she never stops trying to destroy us? Pearl asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Alexander looked at her, resolute. Then I'll build a world where you'll always feel safe. Meanwhile, across town, in a dark mahogany office, Luzviminda sat before a computer. She held a cup of tea and sat beside a man in a coat, a private investigator. I want everything, she said firmly. Background, old employers, childhood records, anything dirty. Understood, ma'am, the investigator replied with a nod. Luzviminda's lips curled slightly. Let's see how clean this Pearl really is. Everyone has a crack. I'll find it. But nothing came up. Luzviminda searched, used every connection, even hired a second investigator. But Pearl's record was spotless. Not a single complaint in the neighborhood. No past relationships, no criminal record. Known in her community as hard-working and kind. Impossible, Luzviminda muttered, gripping a manila folder as she sat on her leather couch. Every woman has something to hide. She's pretending. And that's when her next plan formed. Days passed, and Alexander continued visiting his mother, almost every day, until one evening he found her lying in bed, looking pale. Mum, he said, rushing to her side. Are you okay? You look pale. I didn't want to tell you, she answered weakly. I didn't want to disturb your married life, but I've been having heart problems. The symptoms are back. Maybe the end is near. Alexander froze. He sat on the edge of her bed, holding her hand. I'll take care of you, Mum. You don't have to go through this alone. If you want, we can move back to the States. Pearl and I will come with you so we can take better care of you. But instead of being comforted, Luzviminda's face twisted with fury. So that's it, she snapped. Instead of leaving that woman, you're going to bring her into my house? Mum, I love Pearl. She's my wife, Alexander answered, his tone firm. Let's see how long that love lasts, Luzviminda spat. Don't you have any pity for your mother? You still choose that woman? Alexander didn't answer. The room fell silent. In the days that followed, Pearl began noticing a change in Alexander's behavior. He wasn't as affectionate. He was often serious, quiet, irritable over small things. Love, is something wrong with us? Pearl asked one night while they ate dinner. No, Alexander replied curtly, avoiding her gaze. But the sadness in his eyes betrayed him. Then one day, at the grocery, one of Pearl's co-workers approached her, teary-eyed. Pearl, I'm so sorry, but you might want to see this. She handed over her phone. A post on an anonymous gossip page showed a photo of Pearl helping a male employee carry a box. Does the CEO know his wife's flirting at work? Admin affair? Guess she's not so innocent. Pearl's eyes widened. That's Dennis. I was just helping him with a customer's order. This is crazy. Before she could explain, Alexander arrived, and for the first time, his tone was cold. "I saw the post, Pearl. You should know you're not just an employee anymore. You're my wife. Everything you do is under scrutiny. You should know better." "What do you mean?" Pearl asked, shaking. "I'm not saying you're guilty of anything, but from now on, you can't leave the house without permission. I don't want another scandal." Restrictions started to suffocate her. She couldn't leave the house without explaining where, when, and why. She wasn't even allowed back at the grocery without a bodyguard. Slowly, it felt like she was a prisoner in her own life. One night, Luzviminda came to visit Pearl. She brought with her a printed tabloid. On the front page was a staged photo of Pearl sitting on a park bench, with a man leaning in as if whispering something to her. It was clearly scripted, but in the eyes of a judgmental public, it would be interpreted differently. "No matter how clean a woman appears," Luzviminda said coldly, pretending to feel faint, "there's always dirt if you dig deep enough." Pearl's voice trembled. "I never meant to hurt Alexander. I didn't know anything about that photo. I swear." "Oh, so now you're calling me a liar?" Luzviminda snapped. "I'm not saying that, Mom. I don't know who would do this to us." "You shameless woman! You're lying! You're hurting my son!" "Tita, please! I would never—" Suddenly, Luzviminda collapsed to the floor, clutching her chest, gasping for breath. "Mom!" Alexander shouted from the doorway. His face was filled with panic. He ran to her, helping her up. Pearl stepped forward, but Alexander turned to her with a sharp look. "What did you do to her?" "Nothing. We were just talking. I swear we were only talking." "Just stop talking, Pearl. I don't even know what to believe anymore." Pearl was stunned. She couldn't say another word. She felt the tears rise but held them in. That night, the condo was silent. No sounds, except for the soft ticking of rain on the window pane. Pearl sat on the couch, wearing a hoodie, clutching a cup of cold tea. She hadn't said a word all day. Alexander arrived home, walked straight in, didn't even glance at her. He dropped his keys on the table, took off his coat, and stared out the window. "Is your mom okay?" Pearl finally asked softly. "She's stable. They got to her in time." "Thank God." He didn't turn around. Then Pearl gathered her courage. "I don't know how to explain what happened earlier," she began, her voice shaking. "I didn't hurt her. We were just talking. I asked her if I'd done something wrong." "Pearl," Alexander cut her off, finally facing her. His eyes were tired, heavy, angry. "This isn't just about today." "Then what is it about, Alexander?" Pearl's voice broke. "Is it the photos, the gossip? Why is it easier for you to believe them than to believe your own wife?" Alexander stared at her. "Do you still love me?" Pearl asked, her voice small. He didn't answer. "Because if you did, you wouldn't treat me like a prisoner. You wouldn't make me feel like property." Alexander walked away a few steps, unable to meet her eyes. "There are so many eyes on us, Pearl. Every day there's a new issue. Every move you make is judged. I want to believe you, but it's getting harder." "Oh, I see," Pearl said, now crying but trying to stay composed. "So what do you want me to do? Stop breathing? Stop being me? Just so I can fit into your world?" "That's not what I'm saying." "Then what are you saying, Alexander?" "Because I don't know anymore." He slammed his palm on the armrest. "Every day I'm torn, between you and Mom, you and my reputation, you and all the lies I've accepted just to keep everything together." Silence. Pearl walked closer. Her voice was trembling. "I can do this, Alexander. We can do this. I didn't give up on us, even when people mocked me, judged me, hated me. But if you're the one turning away now." Alexander saw the pain in her eyes, but instead of pulling her in, he stepped back, looked at the floor. "I'm tired, Pearl. I'm tired of defending you to everyone, even to myself." Pearl's chest tightened at his words, so when Alexander spoke again, it was as if her entire world shattered. "You have to make a choice. Either we take a break, or you sign the annulment papers." Pearl froze. She stepped back, realizing he was serious, and in that moment, the ground beneath her collapsed. Sometimes, people wish on silent stars, because choosing to fight for love often comes with wounds that don't heal easily. Months passed. At the top of Villafuerte Tower, Alexander stood in his office, gazing coldly at the cityscape of downtown Los Angeles. He wore a dark gray suit, sharp as always, but the weariness in his eyes betrayed the polish. He'd come in early, not because of workload, but because the silence at home with Stacy was unbearable. That wasn't home. It was a gilded prison. Behind him, the door opened. Luzviminda stepped in, dressed in a cream-colored designer outfit with pearl earrings. She moved with grace, poise, and unspoken authority. "The business partners are waiting, Anak," she said calmly but firmly. "This merger is crucial for the quarter." Alexander didn't answer. He looked out the window. In every view, he searched for Pearl's face. In every raindrop that slid down the glass, he wondered where she was. If she was okay, if she'd eaten, if she was still smiling, like she used to. Luzviminda placed a hand on his shoulder. "It's for the best." And just like that, memories rushed back, the last night he had with Pearl. "I'm begging you, Alexander," Pearl had said, her voice steady but trembling. "I can't be the reason you lose your mother. I see it. You're losing yourself." "Pearl, please," he had pleaded. "I don't know what's real anymore," she whispered. "Alexander, please, I can't take it. Everything is falling apart." "My mom's reputation is on the line," he said. "And I'm tired," he had whispered. "Tired of choosing, tired of defending, tired of you." And with that, he had uttered the words that destroyed everything. You have to make a choice. As painful as it was, he went through with it. A few days after the annulment papers were signed, Pearl disappeared. "She's gone," Luzviminda had confirmed, almost triumphant. The annulment was finalized quickly by their lawyers. Alexander took a deep breath now, standing by the window of his skyscraper. "I don't know if I did the right thing, Mom," he said quietly. Luzviminda's face hardened. "You did. That woman was never worthy of your name. Now you can start over." And so he did. A few weeks later, amidst flowers, violin music, and expensive catering, Alexander married Stacy, daughter of their business partner. Stacy was beautiful, fair-skinned, with long hair and an Ivy League education. Her charm was refined, but behind it lay ambition. In exchange for the marriage, the bond between their companies would strengthen, and most of all, Luzviminda wanted a grandchild. During their honeymoon, Alexander and Stacy barely spoke. At business events, they appeared side by side, but never looked at each other the same way. Once, during a charity gala, an older woman commented, "You're newlyweds. You both look so in love." Stacy smiled and glanced at Alexander. "Of course, Mom," she said. "Newly married, new beginnings, a new future." Alexander showed no emotion, but one night the weight became too much. He sat at the minibar in the mansion, a glass of whiskey in hand, haunted by memories of Pearl, her smile, their laughter at work, her embrace at night. "Alex!" Stacy called as she approached in a silk robe, wineglass in hand, a teasing smile on her lips. Alexander didn't answer. He drained his drink and set the glass down on the marble counter. "I know I'm not Pearl," Stacy said softly, walking closer, "but maybe I can be your relief. Isn't that what our families wanted?" Alexander didn't know what came over him, whether it was the alcohol or the ache. He kissed her, held her face, but there was no warmth in the kiss, no love. And then, without realizing, he whispered her name. Pearl. Stacy's eyes widened. She clutched his shoulders, but she didn't get angry. She just smiled slightly to herself. Pearl, Alexander repeated again, before sinking to the floor, covering his face. The next morning, Stacy stood in front of the mirror, speaking on the phone. Mommy, she whispered. No problem. He still loves that girl, but let him be. Once I get pregnant, the family's fortune will be mine. Mama Luz has already confirmed it. Once there's a grandchild, we're locked in. It's a win-win for the family. And while Stacy carefully laid her trap behind the veil of marriage, Alexander silently unraveled. Not a night went by without remembering Pearl's eyes. Not a morning passed without hoping for news of her. But even when he tried to track her down, no one could say where she had gone. He was forced to live in a world where the reason for his happiness no longer existed. 6 years later, the sun shone brightly over the expansive garden of the Villafuerte estate. Red and gold balloons floated in the air, and guests arrived in semi-formal attire. At the center of it all was a young boy, 6 years old, seated by a grand piano. His hair was neatly combed, and he wore a miniature tuxedo as he quietly waited for his teacher's signal. It was Marcus's piano recital, son of Alexander and Stacy. Alexander stood in the back, phone in hand, ready to record every moment. He smiled proudly, his eyes filled with warmth. Years may have passed, but his instinct to care for his child remained intact. He was a good father, present, gentle, generous. You ready, son? He asked Marcus before the boy stood up. Yes, Daddy, Marcus replied with a grin. The audience applauded as the boy began playing a simplified version of Clair de Lune. Beside Alexander, Luzviminda clapped enthusiastically, though her eyes wandered to the reactions of the crowd more than the stage. Next to her, Stacy wore an emerald green dress, makeup flawless, waving proudly at her son. After the performance, Luzviminda embraced Stacy. Thank you for this, dear, she whispered with a smile. You gave us exactly what this family needs. They kissed each other on the cheek, like true mother and daughter. They looked like a perfect family. No trace of the past remained. It was as if Pearl had been nothing but a bad dream, never to be mentioned again. That evening, at the family dinner, laughter filled the air. The food was delicious. Alexander sipped red wine as relatives cracked jokes. Marcus, teased an aunt, when do you want a baby sister? Baby sister? The boy repeated. I want a baby puppy. Everyone laughed. Stacy nudged Alexander playfully. Maybe we should think about giving him a playmate. I can't be his only friend forever. Alexander chuckled but didn't reply right away. He paused as if something had stirred in his memory. Under the chandelier's light, while the room buzzed with cheer, Luzviminda noticed the flicker in her son's expression. She looked at him, but said nothing. Elsewhere in the city, in a small, humble home tucked between alleyways in East LA, Pearl was busy sewing. Her hair was loose, her face bore the signs of fatigue, but her natural beauty remained. Seated beside her were 2 children, 6-year-old twins, a cheerful girl with a ponytail and a quiet, intelligent boy. Mum, the waistband's too tight, the boy complained as she measured the costume on him. Hold on, sweetheart, I'll fix it, Pearl replied while fine-tuning the stitches. Beside her, snacks were neatly packed for the next day. Banana fritters, caramelized skewered bananas, and homemade popsicles. You've got your dance performance tomorrow, right? She asked, voice tired but warm. Yes, the twins answered in unison. Do your best, okay? And after the performance, you can each have as many popsicles as you want. On the house. Really? Asked the girl. wide-eyed. "Promise," Pearl said, giving them each a kiss on the forehead. "I'm so proud of you both. I love you so much." The next day, at the school event, the multi-purpose hall buzzed with excited families. Children in costumes danced across the stage. Pearl stood quietly in the back, phone in hand, recording every second. As the twins danced, she noticed them glancing around, watching classmates being carried by their dads, given flowers, hugged. It stung. After the show, she approached them, knelt down, and took their hands in hers. "Hey," she said softly, "Mama is super proud of you. You don't need anyone else to prove that, because to me, you're already enough. I love you both so much." The three embraced in the middle of the crowd, and in that simple life, Pearl found pure happiness. Meanwhile, back at the Villafuerte estate, Alexander watched Marcus sleep. Suddenly, something stirred in him, a feeling he couldn't shake. It was Pearl's birthday. He didn't know how or why, but he felt restless. Even after 6 years of silence, he had never forgotten her. Now, with a family of his own, why did it still feel like something was missing? He went downstairs, walked to the library, and opened a drawer. Inside was an old photo booth strip, pictures of him and Pearl, laughing, making silly faces. He had tucked it inside an old book years ago, but he had never thrown it away. "This isn't over," he whispered to himself. He took a deep breath. The next day, he called a private investigator. "Find her," he ordered. "Find Pearl." The midday sun was blazing over the stretch of San Lorenzo marketplace. The crowd, packed shoulder to shoulder, seemed to cook in their own sweat. Everyone rushed to find shade, or at least a passing breeze. The air was thick with the scent of fish, vegetables, and street food, while vendors' voices clashed with the chatter of regular customers. In the middle of the chaos, a woman walked steadily. She carried the weight of life in every step. Pearl. She held a styrofoam cooler in one arm and clutched the small hands of her twins with the other. Both children were sweating, energetic, and hungry for joy. The thin fabric of Pearl's blouse clung to her back, damp with sweat, but her smile never left as she addressed the buyers. "Popsicles, $1 each, cold and sweet. Come get yours," she called, opening the lid to reveal her colorful frozen treats. Purple yam, coconut, mango, chocolate. All homemade the night before to make sure her kids had lunch money the next day. "Mum," her daughter asked sweetly, "can I have the chocolate one later?" "If we sell them all, sweetheart," Pearl replied, winking and kissing her forehead. "Hard work gets a reward." From not far away, a sleek black SUV slowly came to a stop. Before the door even opened, the driver's gaze landed on a woman, petite, modest, yet moving with a weight in every motion. Beside her were 2 children who looked exactly like her. From inside the vehicle, a man in his mid-30s stepped out. "Say I'm sorry," he said, eyes filled with tears. "Say I was lost, and now I'm home." Pearl turned away, wiping her face. "They'll have questions," she said. "I'll answer every single one," he promised. Later that night, Pearl tucked the twins into bed. They held new toys in their arms and smiled sleepily. "Mum, Daddy said he'll come back tomorrow," the little girl murmured. Pearl nodded. "He probably will." "Is he staying forever?" the boy asked. Pearl hesitated, brushing his hair gently. "We'll see," she said softly. Out on the porch, Alexander sat alone, staring at the stars. When Pearl joined him, the air felt lighter, like the night itself was holding its breath. He handed her a folded photo. It was from years ago, the old photo booth strip. "I kept it," he said. "Even when everything else changed, I couldn't let go of this." Pearl held the photo with both hands, looking at their younger, laughing faces. She didn't speak. I know I lost you, Alexander said. But I want to know you again, not as a lover, not even as a wife, just as the mother of my children. Let me earn your trust back. Pearl sighed. I don't know what we are anymore. He nodded. Then let's start with that. They sat there together, not as husband and wife, not as ex-lovers, but as two people tied by time, pain, and love that never quite died. The following weeks passed like a slow, cautious waltz. Alexander visited the children every afternoon. He'd bring books, toys, snacks, and sometimes just stories about the world beyond their little home. The twins adored him immediately. He took them to the park, helped them with homework, and learned their quirks, like how Marcus hated raisins and how Mariah always pretended to be a princess, even in pajamas. Pearl watched from the sidelines. She remained wary. She smiled for the kids, kept things polite, but her guard never dropped. One day, after school, Mariah tugged at her shirt. "Mum, can Daddy come to my recital next week?" Pearl hesitated. "I'll ask," she said. Alexander came as promised. He wore a simple polo, brought flowers, and sat in the middle row. When Mariah stepped onto the stage, she scanned the audience nervously. But the moment she spotted Alexander, her shoulders relaxed and her face lit up. She danced with the grace only a child could possess, pure, full of joy. After the recital, Pearl caught Alexander wiping his eyes. "You okay?" she asked. "I missed so much," he said quietly. She looked at him, then at the twins hugging their dance classmates. "You're here now," she replied. He turned to her. "Can I ask something?" Pearl braced herself. "What is it?" "I know it's selfish, but can we spend a day together? Just the four of us. A simple outing." Pearl didn't answer right away, but the next morning she packed sandwiches, brought extra water bottles, and dressed the kids in their best weekend clothes. At the zoo, they laughed like a real family. The kids rode ponies. Alexander carried them on his shoulders. They took selfies, shared cotton candy, and fed ducks by the pond. That night, Pearl stood at the sink, washing dishes, when Alexander came to say goodbye. "Thank you," he said. "For what?" "For today. For letting me feel like a father, like a real man again." She looked at him for a long time, then went back to scrubbing. Days later, Pearl received a letter, stamped, official. She opened it on the porch. Inside were legal documents, custody papers, no demands, no threats, just a note from Alexander. "I want to be present in their lives, but only if you allow it. I've also included financial support documents. You won't owe me anything. Just let me be their father." Pearl read the letter over and over, then folded it and stared at the horizon. A week later, she arrived at the Villafuerte estate. Luz Viminda nearly dropped her wine glass when she saw her. Pearl stood tall, wearing a clean white blouse and slacks, her hair tied neatly. She looked calm, collected. "I'm not here to argue," Pearl said. "I just want one thing." Luz Viminda raised a brow. "Stay away from my children." "I have no business with your children." "No, but you have a habit of ruining people," Pearl replied. "I won't let you manipulate them the way you tried to manipulate me." Luz Viminda scoffed. "You're still dramatic, I see." "I'm a mother now," Pearl said firmly. "I won't play your games. If you want peace, you'll stay in your lane." Before Luz Viminda could respond, Pearl turned and left. Later that night, she sent Alexander a message. "They're your children too. Come tomorrow, bring breakfast, and leave the past at the door." By 7 the next morning, the front door opened to the scent of pancakes and bacon. Alexander arrived carrying a paper bag, his tie slightly crooked, hair tousled from rushing, a jug of orange juice tucked under one arm. "Someone asked for breakfast?" he joked, stepping inside. The twins came running. "Daddy!" He crouched to meet them, wrapping both in a tight embrace. Pearl emerged from the kitchen, apron tied around her waist, a spatula still in hand. "You're early," she said. "You said breakfast," Alexander replied. "Didn't want to miss my first official invite." They sat around the table like a family that had never broken. Marcus munching on bacon, Mariah telling a story about her school crush, Alexander listening with wide eyes, and Pearl quietly watching them all. It felt like a dream, warm, familiar, dangerous. Later that day, after the kids went out to play with neighbors, Alexander lingered in the kitchen as Pearl cleaned up. "You don't have to do the dishes alone," he said. Pearl handed him a towel. "Then dry." They worked side by side in silence, the rhythm almost too natural. "I'm leaving her," Alexander said suddenly. Pearl stopped rinsing. "I already filed," he continued. "The divorce is in process. Stacy knows. So does my mother." Pearl turned slowly, eyes searching his. "I'm not telling you this to pressure you," he added. "I'm telling you because I'm done living a lie." Pearl placed the plate down gently. "And what do you expect from me, Alex? That I just forgive everything? That we go back to how it was before?" "No," he answered. "I expect nothing. I just want to show you I'm trying. And if someday, if there's even a chance, I want to deserve it." She didn't respond. The next few weeks brought more visits, more stories, more breakfasts. Alexander took the kids on weekend drives, enrolled them in swimming class, even helped Pearl pay for a new refrigerator. Neighbors whispered, but Pearl stayed firm. She was still healing, still learning how to breathe. Then came the school's Parents' Day event. It was the first time the twins would walk on stage, holding both their mum and dad's hands. Pearl wore a light blue dress, Alexander a simple polo. The kids grinned from ear to ear. Teachers smiled, parents watched, and for the first time in a long while, Pearl allowed herself to smile without hesitation. That night, after tucking the twins into bed, Pearl stepped out onto the porch where Alexander waited, seated on the wooden bench. "You waited," she said. "I'd wait forever," he replied. She sat beside him, folding her hands on her lap. "The kids love you." "I love them." Pearl looked out at the stars. "I'm not the same girl you left," she said. "I know. And I won't let anyone break me again." "You won't have to," he promised. She turned to him. "Let's not rush. Let's just raise our children." He nodded. "I'll take whatever you give." For the first time in years, Pearl rested her head on his shoulder, and in that quiet moment, there were no promises, only peace. Time moved gently. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. Life no longer rushed for Pearl. It flowed, slow and steady, like the way sunlight slips through leaves on a quiet morning. Her small business grew. She opened a tiny corner shop, selling her famous frozen treats and banana fritters. Parents from the neighborhood lined up with their children every afternoon. The walls were painted yellow and green. The signage said simply, "Pearls." The twins helped after school. Marcus swept the floor, Mariah handled the coins and change, and sometimes Alexander helped too. He wore an apron, served popsicles, carried flour bags, laughed without fear of cameras or scrutiny. "Big CEO, huh?" Pearl teased one day as he wiped down a table. Alexander grinned. "Best job I've ever had." He had stepped down from his executive role months prior. He kept partial ownership, stayed involved in the background but gave up the limelight, traded skyscraper views for sunrises through shop windows. On weekends, they took road trips to small towns. They hiked, camped, watched the twins chase butterflies. Sometimes, Alexander would take Pearl's hand while she read under a tree. He'd kiss her knuckles, say nothing. Other times, Pearl would find him staring at her, Not with regret, but with reverence. "You're glowing," he'd whisper, and Pearl would smile. "I'm at peace." One night, as rain tapped gently on the roof, Alexander sat on the porch beside her. The twins had fallen asleep early. The shop was locked. The street was still. He took something out of his pocket. Not a ring, a small velvet pouch. Inside was the broken pendant Pearl had once worn, the one that cracked during their first year together. He had kept it. "I had it fixed," he said. Pearl looked at the delicate heart-shaped piece, now whole again. "Why?" she asked softly. "Because we're not broken anymore." She looked into his eyes. He didn't kneel, didn't propose, but he held the pendant out with both hands, a quiet offering. Pearl took it. Her hands trembled. She closed her fingers around the necklace, then placed it around her neck. Tears welled in her eyes, not from sadness but from release. In the stillness of the night, beneath the sleepy sky, Pearl and Alexander leaned into each other. No promises, no grand vows, just love, earned, rebuilt, quiet and true. And from the open window behind them, the twins stirred. Marcus mumbled, "Mom, Dad." Pearl smiled. "I'm here," she said. They both were, at last, together, forever.